With so many cool heroes in Deadlock to choose from, I'm on a mission to learn them all. I'm going to spend 50 games with each character to discover what they can teach me and how they can help me become a better player. Afterwards, I'll discuss my findings on things like builds, positioning, playstyle, and of course fun, all for the love of learning. So today, let's talk about Warden. When I think about why I want to do this series and what excites me about it most, it's going outside of my comfort zone to learn things in Deadlock I wouldn't normally gravitate towards. Generally speaking, when I play games, I'm not much of a sharpshooter, and in all honesty, I'm usually not looking to be one. I like elements of games that test different mechanical skills that I feel more attuned to, like positioning, build crafting, or even mind games, as they come far more naturally to me than aiming does, and I often find them more fun and interesting. However, as a result, I'll often hit a wall in multiplayer games where my mechanics will fall behind my game knowledge, and I can find it rather difficult to keep up with the folks I get matched with. It personally takes me far longer to get comfortable with a game's shooting than it does for me to learn how something like its build crafting works, which leads to plateaus in my progression and can sometimes even push me away from a game entirely. Now, I say that because at the end of last episode with Kelvin, I found myself staring down one of those plateaus. I was feeling really inconsistent in my play, pretty uncomfortable with my mechanics, and just a bit stuck on how I should move forward. I concluded the episode by saying I felt in order to push past my struggles, I'd need to directly challenge those areas by playing a carry or frontline hero that would force me to aim and force me to fight to succeed. Having now spent my 50 games with Warden, I'm pleased to report that I not only had an absolute blast with him, but that I think my plan worked, as Warden's kit has felt like the perfect place for me to start stretching those metaphorical muscles. While Warden is mostly a gun-based carry hero, he also has a lot of options to build him as a hybrid, and that versatility meant that I could sort of meet my goals in the middle, focusing mostly on shooting while still having strong abilities to fall back on. As someone who normally plays a supporting role to avoid being the center of fights, it was a drastic change of pace to instead try to lead the charge, and a thrilling experience when I would make it out on top. Although I did feel like a fish out of water in the beginning, in finding my sea legs, I've not only begun to sharpen the tools I felt were most lacking, but I've also gained confidence in pushing past this first big plateau. So if you're unfamiliar with Warden, here's a quick rundown on his kit. His one are his alchemical flasks, which Warden lobs, exploding on impact to deal damage to enemies it hits, while also reducing their movement speed and their outgoing weapon damage. When leveled, it can also eat an enemy's stamina bar, as well as reduce their fire rate. His two is called Willpower, which is a small barrier Warden applies to himself that also grants him additional movement speed. When leveled, you can get up to 35% extra speed, as well as 40% extra debuff resistance. His three is Binding Word, which is a cage that targets an enemy and will immobilize them if they don't escape its radius in time. The cage deals damage when it hits, scaling pretty heavily with Spirit at 2.4, and it also increases Warden's weapon damage dealt to the heroes it traps. When maxed out, the cage will also silence the player it attaches to until they either escape the radius or are immobilized, which is incredible. Finally, Warden's 4 is his Last Stand, where he gains 50% resistances while channeling up a pulsing cone of spirit power, which damages any enemies in its radius and heals you for 65% of the damage dealt. Leveling it gets you some extra damage, radius, and cooldown, and at max grants you unstoppable during the channel, as well as an extra 30% to the resistances. As I mentioned, I think these abilities give Warden a lot of versatility in his approach, but most importantly, they set him up to be an extremely oppressive force if enemies aren't careful or don't counterbuy. By far though, the single biggest contributor to that offensive pressure is Warden's cage, which I absolutely loved using. When it makes contact, it can often lead to either a guaranteed kill or a massive chunk of health lost, so even just applying it onto an enemy will cause them to scramble, which sometimes can be almost as beneficial as landing it. In lane, you can use it to force enemies to retreat under their tower while you get wave priority, you can use it to easily kite enemies or peel teammates to stop a kill, and once leveled, you can silence enemies like a dynamo looking to engage with an ult, which can completely flip the outcome of a fight. Flasks are also awesome, as they have a really satisfying trajectory to them, and it was loads of fun lobbing them just right to catch someone behind cover or to slow someone trying to escape. Comboing everything together was also really cool, shielding myself as I pushed in to slow with a flask, trapping whoever I tagged in a cage, and just nuking them with headshots or an ult. Overall, Warden's kit was pretty straightforward and easy to use, but I still found it really fun and satisfying as each element complemented one another nicely. Similar to how his abilities and his playstyle make him shine as a hybrid, so too does his gun. It not only deals a really solid amount of of damage that you can build directly into, but Warden's fire rate also scales with his spirit power, so your gun will continue to improve even when you invest into spirit. Overall, I really like the feel of Warden's gun, but its bullet velocity is pretty low at 290 meters per second, which can make it tough to hit moving targets with. Just as a point of comparison, Haze's velocity is 762, Wraith's is 572, and Doorman's is 203, so Warden is definitely on the lower end. The more time I spend with Warden, the more I got used to the velocity and could land some good hits at range, but I would usually just try to stick pretty close quarters to reduce my chances of missing. I often found myself at a closer range anyways, trying to work around the cage, so while it did feel like a bit of a weakness whenever I was dueling higher range, higher velocity heroes, I found it usually balanced out in the end. When it came to building Warden, I stuck with the hybrid approach throughout my entire time with him, but you can absolutely go in so many different directions. Whether you wanted to build him almost entirely gun, spirit, or even tanky, I think you can make a bunch of different options work based on which aspects of his kit resonate with you. For me, I knew that I mostly wanted to go into gun to focus on shooting, but knowing that it might be an inconsistent option, I also wanted to build around my cage and my ult to give myself a few crutches. Since I'm still not the most accurate, I decided to commit to my spirit options in lane and try to play around my flasks for more consistent damage and pressure. With that in mind, I'd start off with extended mag to help push waves and hopefully deny some souls before I would go for my spirit spike. For my 4.8k spike, I kept things pretty simple with extra and improved spirit to up my scaling, quicksilver reload for extra flask damage and to reload when I threw one, and arcane surge to give me an extra stamina bar as well as some ability range for my cage and my ult. To strengthen flasks some more, I'd also put my first 2 upgrades into them to get the extra damage, as well as a point into my cage in case I caught anybody, and a point into my ult for the range. After my spirit spike, I like to pick up slowing bullets to make shots and cages easier to land, and I'd continue onto my gun spike or go for vitality depending on how well I was doing. For the gun spike, I like to add in escalating resilience as it gets you that 30% bullet resist as well as 15% weapon damage. For vitality, I like enduring speed so I can move faster in my ult as well as just in general, and then I'd either invest into lifesteal if I needed some more sustain, or a specific counter item like counterspell or dispel magic. Once I got my spikes rolling, I think expansion is fantastic for both cage and ult, and I also really like Mystic Slow to try to lock people down and guarantee a cage. Slow does have diminishing returns when you stack it, but an extra foot of distance can make the difference between a landed cage and a missed one, so I think it's totally worth it. I also think it's great for ult to keep enemies inside of the cone, and in late game, upgrading it to lightning scroll can do a lot of work in a team fight, so it's been a go-to for me. Once I've got expansion on my cage, I like to invest into a tier 4 gun item before I work to round off my build, with my 3 choices usually being crippling headshot, glass cannon, or lucky shot. For teams with high health or heavy healing, crippling is amazing, but if I'm just looking for damage, I'd go with glass cannon if I had a really good early game, and lucky shot if I was less confident in getting consistent kills. While I think both items are great, just for fun, I decided to give them a brief test to see how they'd stack up, and they actually came out pretty close. Everything was tested by landing all headshots at the same boon level with the same items investment in spirit power, based around when I would usually buy it in a game. With no stacks, a magazine of glass cannon dealt 2,878 damage over 4.62 seconds, which comes to a DPS of about 623. Testing 10 magazines with lucky shot, the average across those magazines was 2,983 damage for a DPS of about 646. So with no stacks, the 80% damage boost from glass cannon falls behind the average lucky shot magazine, but when you gain stacks, glass cannon will massively pull ahead in DPS, which is to be expected. Here's a chart showing the DPS at each stack level under the same parameters, where at max, it deals a whopping 886 DPS. So with that all in mind, I think unless you can build and maintain at least a few stacks of glass cannon, lucky shot will be a far more consistent option to net higher total damage at a lower DPS. They also pair extremely well together, and in a few games where I was really on a hot streak, the increased total damage from lucky shot made it easier to gain those early glass cannon stacks, and once it all got rolling, things would get pretty ridiculous. With my gun investment settled, I'd mostly just work towards upgrades throughout the game, with standouts being Boundless and Merc Mag so I could max out my spirit damage. I also think Siphon Bullets is a great option to counter tankier heroes, as you not only get the health steal, but 15% weapon damage as well, and it pairs excellently with crippling. I think having some lifesteal is also a great idea with Warden, as he'll really benefit from it due to his high damage, but I would usually just go with bullet lifesteal and not not invest fully into Leech, since Warden's ult has lifesteal built in, and I wouldn't be dealing consistent spirit damage otherwise. I found it to be a pretty pricey investment that I would usually only buy if I had everything else I wanted. So, how was my experience overall? What did I learn, and what do I need to continue to improve? First and foremost, I had so much fun with Warden. I commented in last episode that to my surprise, Kelvin was the hero that's resonated with me the least out of everyone I've tried thus far, and Warden has been the opposite. I wasn't sure if I would like playing him, but I really enjoyed myself, and I felt a lot better working with his kit than I had expected. I was able to get a good grasp on his strengths, and I could push myself to focus on gunfights like I had wanted to, but his versatility meant that I didn't need to solely rely on weapon damage to contribute if I didn't want to. Things did get off to a rocky start though, as I was getting used to Warden's gun, but now that I've put the reps in, my aim feels noticeably sharper than when I started, and I'm much more confident in a fight. One of my notes from last episode was that I wanted to try to find a way to have a larger individual impact with my games, and find the right way to do that with whatever hero I was using. This time around with Warden, there were far more games where I felt like I actually made a difference, instead of just kind of being along for the ride like I had felt with Kelvin. While there were games that I performed better and games that I performed worse, as to be expected, I feel like overall my performance was consistent, which I'm really happy about. I ended my time with Warden at the perfect 50% win ratio, which in all honesty I am thrilled with. The 50 games I played were really rough to say the least, but as I reflect on them and take stock of what I learned, it's clear to me just how much I managed to improve. I started off the first few days with 1 win and 7 losses, which was rather discouraging. I stepped away for the day, spent the rest of the evening thinking through my game plan, and I hopped on the next day determined to try again. I ended up winning 8 of the next 9 games I played, and everything started to click. I picked up that I wasn't leading my shots enough and started being more accurate. I adjusted my build to play heavier into my ult so I could deal damage while still getting used to shooting, and I started experimenting with different items and AP orders to see what would work for me. Each game started to feel better than the last, and steadily my gun damage increased as I landed more shots and found my footing. As my confidence grew, I started to pivot my builds to be more gun heavy, gradually netting me more kills, more good plays, and more wins. Before I knew it, I was testing my limits, winning 1v1s, and throwing myself into the middle of team fights, exhilarated when we'd come out on top. One of the things that I really strive to do in Deadlock is to just try my best and accept wins and losses equally as opportunities to learn and improve. The entire purpose of this series is to approach the game from an improvement mindset and try to analyze my personal performance as I experience each hero. In the end, I don't think the win-loss ratio matters in that equation, as I believe that you can learn just as much from a loss as you can from a win, which I very much did with Warden. Importantly, while I learned a lot from my time with Warden, I also had a lot of fun with him, which made the experience for this episode all the more rewarding. While I still have a long way to go to better my mechanics, I've gained a lot of confidence that I can actually improve, and that my strategy of playing a hero to challenge my weak points is an effective one. With that in mind, I think I should continue to play some gun heroes, try to get some more reps in, and just see what's next for my journey to improve. I'll absolutely be returning to Warden in the future, and I'm excited to keep the momentum going as I move on to the next hero and see how far I can continue to push myself. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you think of Warden and what heroes you'd like to see me learn for this series. I've also put the build ID in the description for my hybrid Warden build if you're looking for a place to start, and you can subscribe to the channel to keep an eye out for more videos soon.